A doll crying in the middle of a seemingly happy birthday party. A moan breaking out in the rain as a car braked too late. A whisper from where no one can see. Little one, don't go alone. Welcome back to Whisper Horror Channel, where every sin finds its way back home. If this is your first time here, don't forget to subscribe, like and share the video to spread chilling stories to more people. Today follow Ryan and Emma in a true story about a rainy night, a collision, and a debt of a tormented soul that cannot be escaped. Midwest afternoon, Nebraska, autumn. The Toyota sedan stopped on the street. Under late October ginkgo trees turning golden, Ryan glanced at his watch, grumbling in the car, the taste of morning coffee still lingering. The radio station played a talk show about everyday worries. Emma stepped out of the animal shelter, her face speckled with freckles, eyes still showing fatigue but smiling brightly. Have you been waiting long, honey? Sorry, saved another lost kitten at the end of my shift. Ryan smiled, shrugging. Without you, the cats would probably rule the city. She sat in the passenger seat, adjusting her seatbelt, excited to go back to your parents' place. Of course, haven't been back to Westwood in 2 months. Emma hesitated, her brows furrowing slightly. Remember not to drink too much, okay? Jake and your dad are there. Don't lose control. The police have been really strict lately. Ryan waved his hand. Sweetheart, it's been ages since I saw Jake. Even if I drink, I'll just sip. What are you worried about? She shook her head, laughing. Just warning you, if you get drunk, Dad will frown. You'll see. Your dad, the most sober man in Westwood, who dares to defy him. They stopped at a nearby Target. Ryan picked out a bottle of California wine, a box of Godiva chocolates for his mother. Emma reached for a crying doll in the toy aisle. As she was about to examine it, the doll let out a strange shrill cry that made Ryan suddenly shiver. Emma laughed. Kayla will love this. She likes these creepy things. Ryan shook his head. If she makes me imitate a crying ghost again this time, I'm out. After checking out, they turned to leave. The sky had turned golden orange, with purple clouds gathering, signaling the onset of a chilly weekend night. Ryan's Toyota pulled into the driveway of a craftsman-style wooden house, with a sprawling lawn, one side lined with red maples full of leaves, the other side a backyard with a stone patio, an oak table, and a smoking barbecue. On the porch, a welcome home sign swayed, a familiar greeting from Mr. and Mrs. Carter whenever their children rarely gathered. Inside, Mr. Carter, large and sturdy, graying hair wearing an apron, was diligently flipping grilled meat at the barbecue pit. Mrs. Carter, short hair, hurried but kind eyes, was setting out salad, while on the phone reminding her children to get ready. The atmosphere was typically American family, warm but somewhat reserved, each person busy with their own tasks, distinctly independent. A car horn blared. From an SUV, Sarah, dressed in jeans and a plaid shirt, stepped out, followed by Jake, wearing a hoodie, carrying a case of beer, and Kayla, a 7-year-old blonde girl, wearing a unicorn backpack, hugging a small beagle. The family waved to each other across the yard, each group approaching from a different direction, but smiles instantly bridged the distance. Ryan walked over, put his arm around Jake's shoulder, and teased him as soon as he touched him. Look at you, already pulling out beer before dinner. Jake laughed, snapping his fingers. Gotta have plenty to have fun, right? Sarah shook her head, placing a bag of cookies on the table. Ryan, are you planning to stay for good this time, or just hide up here for the weekend, and then disappear again? Ryan pretended to be shy. Don't worry, sis. If I forget my niece's birthday, Kayla will shave my head off. Kayla jumped up, running into Emma. Auntie Emma, did you bring a gift? You promised. Emma smiled and handed her the gift bag. Kayla snatched it, beaming. She tore open the colored paper, and the crying doll, as soon as it was revealed, began to cry, wah, wah, throughout the air. The whole family burst out laughing, and Kayla curiously twisted it. Suddenly, a strange glimmer appeared in her eyes, her hand hesitating. Sarah knelt beside her daughter. What's wrong, honey? Kayla whispered. It just said, but it wasn't a doll's cry. Jake interjected, playing along. Could it be a ghost doll? Mr. Carter from the grill called out. Sounds like Jake's making things up. Kayla, this doll only cries, it doesn't whisper, my dear. Ryan winked at Emma, noticing Kayla still staring at the toy with a wary expression. Mrs. Carter gently ushered everyone to the table, setting out grilled meat, salad, mashed potatoes, dipping sauce, and French fries. Dishes clinked, laughter filled the air, but somewhere in the background, a somber tone, moments of silence when someone drifted into thoughts about their own lives. Mrs. Carter asked, "Emma, is the animal shelter busy these days?" Emma nodded, serving salad to Kayla. "Busy all year, Mom. Lots of lost cats and dogs this season." Sarah interjected, smiling knowingly, "Look at me, Mom, a real rescue worker." The conversation revolved around business, Kayla's school, Ryan's career, and Jake's recently won project. Somewhere there were gentle reminders. "It's going to rain heavily tonight. You two should stay. No need to cross the highway in the dark." Mrs. Carter didn't hide the worry in her eyes. Ryan nodded, but still laughed it off, his gaze directed at Jake, as if waiting for a supportive pat on the shoulder. Night fell, the patio lights casting a golden glow on everyone's faces. Amidst the laughter, there were also moments of silence. Kayla suddenly tugged at Sarah's sleeve and whispered, "Mom, I hear someone else in the doll. It keeps crying. Do you hear it?" Sarah rubbed her daughter's back, a faint smile on her lips, but her complexion changed slightly. Outside in the yard, the wind rustled, the early autumn chill seeping into the party, bringing with it a fleeting sense of unease that no one paid close attention to. The patio behind the house shimmered under string lights and the glow from the grill. Dishes clinked softly, and on the wind was the faint smell of smoked meat, sweet corn grilled with butter, and roasted black pepper. The entire Carter family gathered around the large wooden table, each with their own task or story, portraying a typical American blend of independence and connection. Jake raised his beer glass, clinking it lightly against Ryan's bottle. "I bet no dad tonight would dare to refuse another round of beer." Ryan smirked, his eyes seeming to challenge himself. "If Kayla ever asks why Uncle Ryan always leaves last when there's a big party, I'll always blame Jake." Sarah glanced at her husband, shook her head, then turned to her mother. "Mom, don't worry. I'll watch Kayla tonight. These guys can drink as much as they want." Mrs. Carter smiled faintly, but a hint of concern remained in her eyes. "I know you children are grown now. Everyone has their freedom, but I worry. The road back to the city has many trucks, and it's about to rain." Mr. Carter looked at Ryan, his gaze understanding, more serious than usual. "Do you remember me telling you about the time I had to sleep in the car because I drank too much to drive home? Don't be foolish, even with Jake here to help. Last night, the state radio warned that traffic police will be very strict this week. The dinner table atmosphere was lively, but underneath were reminders that were brushed off with humor." Emma suddenly lowered her voice. "Honey, maybe we should stay. Kayla's having fun, and Mom would be relieved." Ryan squeezed Emma's hand under the table, smiling confidently. "I can handle it. I want to be there to check on the project tomorrow morning. I know this road like the back of my hand." A hint of unease flickered in Emma's eyes. Kayla sat nearby, clumsily placing the doll on the dining table. The shrill wah-wah sound suddenly echoed again, reverberating through the chairs, causing all eyes to instinctively slow down a beat. Jake looked at his niece, intending to make a joke but stopped. He suddenly felt a chill down his spine. Kayla stared intently at the doll, her hand trembling slightly, her lips pressed together. Sarah leaned down and whispered, "What's wrong, honey? Don't you like the doll anymore?" Kayla mumbled, "No, it keeps telling me not to cry. I don't understand. Can you hear it, Mom?" Sarah remained silent, gently embracing her daughter's shoulders. Dinner continued, bathed in warm golden light, but the conversation shifted to hushed tones, and a strange air thickened. Outside, bursts of cold wind lashed, the rustling of maple leaves scraping against the patio stones, like an ominous presence foreshadowing something unusual. Emma gently wiped the sweat from her forehead, though it was already cold. Ryan felt his throat dry but still forced a loud laugh whenever Jake teased him, as if to ward off an ambiguous, unnameable premonition. The patio lights outside blazed brightly, reflecting the rain beginning to patter on the wooden patio surface. Mr. Carter packed up the grill, then turned and handed Ryan the car keys, as if passing on an old worry. Mrs. Carter had already set out blankets and pillows on the sofa, still hoping someone would change their mind and stay. Sarah finally spoke up. "I've locked the garden door. If you two don't mind, just stay here. It'll be perfect to leave tomorrow." Jake chimed in, a good excuse for Ryan to stay and hang out for another round. Ryan shrugged, looking at Emma. Her eyes sent a wordless message. "Are you sure?" He laughed, joking softly. "If you're scared, I'll drive straight back to the city. No worries." Emma said nothing, just squeezed his hand, her fingernail marks clearly visible on the back of his hand. Kayla watched the beagle run around the table legs, her hand still holding the crying doll. The doll cried silently again, a small sound but clearly audible in the now quiet air. No one, not even Ryan, truly paid attention to the small unease that had seeped deep into every layer of conversation. The goodbyes were quick, as they had been many times before, hurried hugs, trite admonitions. But this time, Mrs. Carter held Emma for a few extra seconds, whispering softly, "Be careful, my dear." Outside in the yard, the rain suddenly intensified. Ryan opened the car door. Emma sat beside him. Kayla waved from behind the living room window, her eyes drowned in the dull light. In the car, the radio was now just a steady static. Emma's eyes were wet, but she said nothing, just looked towards her husband. Ryan still smiled, but his hand on the steering wheel suddenly became soaked with sweat. The headlights cut through the rain. The tires slid through a large puddle by the road. The Westwood Suburban Residences sign shone faintly. Behind them, all advice, all signs, everything had been left behind, along with a vague premonition growing at the end of the road. As the golden lights turned into chilling darkness, Ryan strained his eyes, following the patchy halos from the streetlights, feeling a biting cold creep up his neck, even though the car's heater was on low. The rain was like an unending curtain, pouring layer after layer onto the windshield, the wipers dragging tiredly like an unnamed worry swelling between the couple. Emma was silent beside him, trying to hold her breath, her shoulders hunched, trembling, unsure if from cold or an unshakable haunting. Each time Ryan shifted gears, Emma would startle slightly, her hand clutching her bag strap tightly, her palm slick with sweat. "Are you cold? We should have stayed with your parents tonight." Emma's voice trembled faintly, falling into silence like a drop of water sinking into a sea of rain. Ryan didn't answer, just forced a smile. Outside the window, the lights of 24-hour supermarkets faded, replaced by empty stretches of road, trees lining the path shrouded in biting cold darkness. For the first time that night, Ryan wondered, after all, what vague fear was making him tremble? A rainy night drive, preventative reminders, or just a sense of alienation, an emptiness he couldn't name. The atmosphere shattered with the whistling wind, the radio shifting to chaotic static. Flash flood, Highway 21, be careful on inclines, all receded into an unsettling rustle, as if foreshadowing something about to happen. Just a few minutes later, as Ryan leaned forward, trying to steer clear of a falling tree branch in the rainy darkness, a white silhouette suddenly flashed in front of the car. Reality felt distorted. Everything moved in slow motion. The puffy coat of a woman, her pregnant belly dimly visible under the soaking wet cloak, both hands raised as if begging for help, a small bag carelessly slung behind her. The screeching of brakes tore through the sound of the rain. Ryan only managed a groan, sweat streaming down his temples. A deep, heavy impact, tires sliding on the glistening wet road, the front of the car dipping. All suppressed sounds burst forth in an instant. Emma lunged forward, her mouth contorted in horror. Her voice was choked, stifled. "Ryan, oh my God, we just hit someone. Stop the car." Ryan's hands stiffened on the steering wheel, each fingertip trembling like someone with a high fever. Through the rearview mirror, he vaguely saw the woman's crumpled figure lying on the grassy roadside, her small bag flung open, rolling into the ditch, a dark red streak mixing with the glistening mud. Emma began to cry, her voice caught deep in her throat, both panicked and desperate. Ryan half wanted to brake, half wanted to jump out of the car, but then all reason out of fear, out of survival instinct, out of an unexplainable fear of being discovered, converged into an action contrary to everything he had ever believed in himself. In that instant, he shifted gears, pressed hard on the accelerator. The car sped away, the engine howling in the heavy rain. Opening his eyes, Ryan saw Emma frantically questioning him again, tears and rainwater streaming down her face. Why did you run? We have to stop, call an ambulance, Ryan. You just killed someone, do you hear me?" Ryan clenched his jaw, his throat constricted. He knew Emma was right, but at this moment, there was only the erratic beating of his heart, and the sound of rain drumming judgments on the car, on them both. No one spoke again, until the car rounded the next intersection, tires gently vibrating on every wet streak. In Emma's ragged breathing, Ryan's voice emerged, hoarse and thick. "If we stop, everything will be over. No one knows. It's raining heavily tonight, street cameras. Who knows if they'll see anything?" Emma sobbed,
turning her face to the window, her body recoiling in despair, as if all her principles had just been crushed under the car's wheels. Outside, the rain still poured onto the road, washing away all traces. Only fear remained, clinging to the two people who had just crossed their own boundaries. Emma didn't take her eyes off the car window for the rest of the ride, her mind drifting between panic and an unnameable shock. The outside sounds seemed to blend together, the increasingly heavy drumming of rain, the radio's static now just a meaningless wave moving across the dashboard. She no longer recognized her own heartbeat, nor the rhythm of the tires gliding on the water. In contrast to Ryan, Emma couldn't bury the horror. She needed a point to cling to justify the recent blow to her conscience, but all logic melted in the silence that enveloped them. They arrived at the apartment. Ryan placed his hand on the key hook, opening the door with mechanical movements. No one spoke. The rain still pounded on the window pane, water droplets trailing as if blood had just splattered into Emma's mind. She ran into the bathroom, slumped over the sink, her knuckles white and trembling. Cold water splashed across her cheeks. She mumbled to herself unconsciously, "I'd just killed someone. A pregnant woman. No way." Ryan stood leaning against the wall outside the room, his hands still trembling uncontrollably. He pressed his forehead against the cold door frame, closing his eyes tightly, trying to recapture every moment. The woman's face, the fading white coat silhouette behind the rain, even the small bag flying into the ditch and the dark red mud. Those scenes clung to him, preventing him from taking more than a few deep breaths. He wanted to find a reason, to justify what he had just done. "They won't recognize our car. It's too dark. The cameras probably won't see clearly. It was just an accident, right? If I call the police, will I lose everything?" Emma emerged, her face pale and drained of strength. She looked at Ryan with eyes mixed with anger, fear and helplessness. "We can't just ignore this, Ryan. How long do you plan to live with this thought?" Her voice broke as if she had just been sobbing. Ryan didn't reply, just slumped onto the edge of the sofa, clutching his head, his hands covering his eyes. The space between them thickened with unspoken words, with things that could no longer be retracted.
That night, Emma curled up in bed, not bothering to change out of her wet clothes. Every small sound made her flinch in fear. The sharp ticking of the clock, the dripping of water from the eaves trough outside, the distant, prolonged wail of a police car. She found herself drifting between two realities, one being the recent past, warm, gathered with Ryan's mother's reminders about safety, the other, a terrifyingly cold present. Ryan tossed and turned, his eyes staring blankly at the dark ceiling, his mind ceaselessly repeating a question. If I had stopped, helped, would everything be better? But now, all justifications were just the fear of being discovered, of losing everything he once thought important. In his final days before falling asleep, Ryan heard Emma subtly gasp, but didn't dare turn to embrace his wife. The distance between them that night was greater than anything outside the house. The next morning, before the sun could even rise, Emma awoke with a start. Her pillow was soaked. She didn't know if it was sweat or tears. She walked out of the room, her steps light as if afraid of disturbing anything. Ryan was already up, sitting in front of the TV, his eyes blankly glued to the morning news. The sound was steady, drowning everything in a wall of silence. Police discovered a serious accident last night on Lincoln 21 highway. The victim was a young pregnant woman left by the roadside, her body found this morning. According to preliminary investigation, the vehicle left the scene. Police are still pursuing all leads. The sound of Emma's coffee spoon dropping, sharp and cold in the still air. She bowed her head, tears falling into her trembling palms. Ryan didn't look back, his fingers pressing against the armrest, his teeth clenched. The feeling of survival became something truly repulsive. Emma looked at her husband, gasping. She was pregnant. If it were us, if it were me, would you let that just go easily? Ryan didn't reply, his lips moving silently. In the next few hours, they barely spoke. Ryan buried his head in his laptop, his eyes empty before meaningless spreadsheets. Emma slammed the bedroom door shut, washing the clothes that had been soaked the night before. As she picked up Ryan's jacket, a faint bloodstain still seeped onto the cuff, mixing with the distinctive sour smell of rain. She sniffed deeply, a stinging sensation reaching her throat, nearly making her vomit. As night fell, when she thought Ryan was sound asleep, Emma suddenly woke up with a strange sound echoing from the living room, a sound all too familiar, yet seeming to come from far away. A child's faint sobbing, a broken wah-wah sound that echoed and then fell silent. Goosebumps rose on her arms. She went to check, but the only answer was an empty room, darkness filling every corner. Emma's heartbeat pounded in her temples. She stood frozen for a long time, then quietly returned to her room, clutching the blanket, trying to fall back asleep, but unable to close her eyes. Saturday morning, Ryan suggested breaking the tension. "Honey, how about we organize a barbecue this weekend? Let's do something fun with a crowd. What do you think?" Emma nodded vaguely, her eyes still holding a hint of unease, not really listening to every word her husband said. She diligently wiped the floor, and whenever she opened the door to the hallway, she still saw a small trail of water staining the base of the wall, as if the rain outside had never stopped inside their house. Ryan told himself that the party would put everything back on track, but when he closed the closet door and looked at the gray raincoat slowly dripping onto the carpet, he understood. No matter how hard he tried to bury it, everything was just beginning. All the normalcy they had built was just a mask for a gradually seeping black hole, ready to swallow everything. Night still clung to the apartment like a cold shell. Since that morning meal, Emma had barely spoken another word to Ryan beyond essential exchanges. Every corner of the house suddenly became alien, silently accumulating an unnamed sorrow. Emma suffered from sleepless nights. As soon as she closed her eyes, the image of the woman falling by the roadside, the small bag covered in mud, the blood stain on the grass, and the car's shadow sliding through the water, intertwined with every breath. She gradually became sensitive to the smallest sounds. Every night, with just a rustle in the hallway, a shadow gliding through the crack of the door, Emma would hold her breath, her heart aching. Once in the endless quiet, she heard a child sobbing in the living room, a light scratching sound on the wood so clear that she shot up, stumbled to open the door and found everything perfectly still. Only Ryan's raincoat cast the last drops of water onto the cold floor. Ryan often buried his head in his laptop screen, his shadow cast on his study wall now like a part of the solidified dust. Every time Emma walked past the room, she always avoided Ryan's gaze, and if she faced him, she only saw a quiet haunting, no longer the confidence or humor from before, but the look of someone adrift in a sea of guilt, ready to deny every reminder just to survive the day. One evening, Emma opened the laundry closet and found Ryan's jacket unwashed, a faint, dried bloodstain still clinging to the cuff, twisted in the black fabric. She picked it up and sniffed it. It was no longer just the sour smell of rainwater, but something very clear, a memory reeking of flesh and blood mixed with a thick dread that sent a chill down Emma's spine. The next night, just as Emma was in the kitchen washing dishes, amidst the hum of the dishwasher, the crying started again, faint but persistent, as if echoing from someone's memory. This time, Emma couldn't dismiss it. She turned off the faucet, listening. The crying echoed from the old bedroom door, lingering on and off, then gradually fading into the wind outside, as if it had never existed. She told Ryan about it, her voice hesitant. "Do you hear anything at night? It sounds like a baby crying, like someone calling out." Ryan pretended to laugh, awkwardly denying, "It's probably the neighbors, or just the cats. You're too stressed." But Emma saw clearly. Ryan avoided her gaze, his whole body tense, his hand fiddling with a lighter, his fingernails covered in scratches. Between them, the space seemed to tighten more than ever. In the following days, Emma didn't even dare to sleep, just lay curled up, watching the clock tick by. She often startled awake at night, every time she heard an ambulance wail outside, the smell of rainwater invading her mind. Sometimes, she was haunted by the feeling that someone was watching her from behind, an unnamed shadow, only becoming clearer each time she closed her eyes. Ryan also seemed to gradually sink into a feeling of overwhelming guilt. He avoided listening to the news, always kept the curtains closed, his hands becoming clumsy whenever Emma looked into his eyes for too long. In a brief moment, Emma caught Ryan standing in the bathroom, his shoulders trembling slightly, tap water running over his shoulders, but his head still bowed low as if praying, atoning for something no one but them understood. There were a few times Ryan opened his mouth to apologize, but all words recoiled in his throat, becoming something heavier, more persistent than the fear of being caught. Before the barbecue party that Ryan suggested, the entire house remained cold, the air still thick with a damp smell, every hidden corner seemingly heavy with something unnameable. Emma quietly changed the tablecloth, arranged dishes, the cold yellow light from outside slanting onto her slightly trembling fingers. When Ryan asked, "Are you okay?" she only nodded faintly. When he closed the closet door, his gaze lingered on the silver-gray raincoat still hanging on the hook, slowly dripping water onto a stain on the wooden floor. Ryan looked for a long time, feeling that every trace in the world could be washed away by rain. Only the guilt of that night remained, seeping out, staining their minds with indelible marks, and they both knew everything had only just begun. The weekend sunlight gently spread across the suburban yard, where the extended Carter family gathered under the shade of large trees. Laughter and conversation mingled with the old music wafting from a small speaker on the porch. Children ran and chased each other among the tables, sometimes stopping by the stone table where Kayla had placed her crying doll. Its low, hoarse sound seemed to intermingle with the fragile joy. That morning, Emma was alone in the supermarket, her hand tightly clutching her shopping list, her heart heavy with an unnameable feeling. Before going home, as she emerged from the supermarket and headed towards the parking lot, she suddenly noticed a woman standing in her way. The woman was drenched, her hair matted to her face, wearing a large rough coat that bulged at the belly. As Emma approached, the woman simply turned her shoulder slightly, blocking the car as if waiting for someone. Emma lowered her window, trying to suppress her annoyance. "Excuse me, please move aside, I'm in a hurry." Not a word in reply, only a faint, twisted smile, eyes hollow and unseeing of reality. Then she quietly turned her back, her wet coat dragging on the asphalt. Looking in the rearview mirror, Emma startled. The person had vanished as if she had never existed. The outdoor party took place in a warm atmosphere, mixed with a hint of hesitation. Ryan, Emma, Sarah, and her husband, and little Kayla, along with their parents, chatted and laughed, but everyone's eyes held a subtle questioning look. When Ryan's mother brought up the topic, "You two look different lately. Is there good news?" Emma evaded, and Ryan laughed it off, probably just forgot what normal feels like, after not gathering for so long. Kayla was unusually quiet that day. She sat alone under the oak tree, whispering to the empty space in front of her, her eyes wide and very distant. "The baby doesn't like dolls. The baby likes real things. Mom, you know." Sarah, passing by, suddenly stopped. "Who are you talking to?" Kayla smiled very naturally. "To the baby, under the table just now." At that moment, the doll on the table suddenly began to cry, the shrill sound prolonged even though no one touched it. Everyone briefly froze, then forced a laugh to dismiss it. But Kayla's gaze quietly shifted to the corner of the porch, where a faint shadow had just glided past. Inside the house, Ryan's mother was getting towels from the kitchen. As she turned and walked down the hallway, she glanced and clearly saw a woman with long hair covering her face, her coat soaking wet, gliding close to the wall. Without thinking anything unusual, she called out to the living room. "Did someone new just arrive?" Ryan paused, his mouth hesitant. "No, Mom. It's just us here." Sarah was washing her hands at the sink near the kitchen, when suddenly the water turned a faint pink, like diluted blood, and emitted a pungent metallic smell. She shivered, looking up at the mirror. Behind her, the clear reflection of a standing figure, a blurry silhouette merging with the light. Sarah spun around, but behind her was only an empty hallway, a cold radiating down to her heels. As daylight faded, people gradually left. Ryan quietly stood in the corner of the yard, looking back at where the doll had been placed on the stone table. In a trembling moment, he saw a tiny, blood-stained child's footprint, clearly imprinted on the stone, then gradually fading as the wind blew leaves over it. Kayla looked back, her eyes unusually solemn. The little girl clung to her mother's hand and whispered, her voice deep, unsuited for her age. "His uncle is about to lose his wife, just like that other woman." All the last words of the day dissolved into the fading evening. As the last cars left the driveway, a chilling premonition suddenly lingered in the air. The boundary between real life and something vague, ghostly had just been touched, like a threshold no one dared to cross, but everyone knew it had already opened. The early autumn air grew heavier towards evening, rustling leaves casting long shadows on the empty porch. The afternoon rain only clung to the edges of the leaves, wind blowing across the stone table where the tiny blood-stained footprint had vanished among cold mud streaks. Ryan and Emma's house fell silent again. They cleaned up the remnants of the party. Everything in their eyes was just a repetition of a hard-to-hide sense of unease and fatigue. As night fell, Emma placed her hand on the windowsill, her eyes gazing vaguely into the backyard, where the yellow light cast shadows of tree branches on the wall. She found it hard to sleep, her mind still stirred by the image of the woman she met at the supermarket, circling unspoken questions. From the living room, Ryan arranged chairs and tables, occasionally glancing quickly towards the stone table, seemingly still haunted by the bloodstain appearing and fading under the evening breeze. In the dark hallway, Kayla woke up for a drink of water, unintentionally stopping at the living room door. Her eyes watched the backyard, her hand fiddling with the doll. A faint, gentle cry echoed beside her ear.
Kayla turned, only to see a thin mist rising in the corner of the window. She returned to her bedroom, but this time pulled the blanket high over her head, whispering softly, "Little one, don't cry. Little one, don't go alone." In the kitchen, Emma's shadow was faintly cast on the refrigerator door. She felt a strange cold spreading from her feet up her spine. Each time the streetlight passed by, the shadows in the house seemed to move, lengthening and contracting with the rhythm of the wind. Near dawn, Emma woke up with a start, having dreamed of the supermarket scene again. In the dream, the strange woman's face was still indistinct, only two hollow eye sockets, her mouth twisted in a smile. "Can't you see me?" A vague call echoed. Emma woke up with a chill, her hands clenched into fists. Ryan beside her also stirred awake, his forehead beaded with sweat. He said nothing, only felt the distance in their bedroom grow clearer. The unease was no longer something they could hide, though no one dared to acknowledge it aloud. On the porch, the last night's wind blew the leaves sideways, bringing in rustling sounds like distant sighs somewhere around the house. Everything was normal, but nothing was truly the same anymore. In that atmosphere, the boundary between what they once thought was real and a silent crisis was cracking somewhere, and they both felt something was always watching, holding on, waiting for the weakest moment for people to deny their own conscience. Monday morning sunlight streamed through the thin curtains in Ryan and Emma's small suburban home, bathing the kitchen in a soft golden light like a lullaby. The city outside was just beginning to stir, distant car engines starting, wind gently rustling leaves, everything quiet and peaceful. But at the sink, Emma stood silently, her hand clutching a hidden pregnancy test kit, two pink lines clearly visible, like a fragile line between fear and a growing hope within her. Ryan appeared at the kitchen door, his hair disheveled after a restless night. He wore an old flannel shirt, his eyes still distant. Seeing Emma standing absent-mindedly, he didn't miss the chance to tease. "Must be all that barbecue from the party weekend. I saw you eating like a bear preparing for hibernation." Emma forced a smile, her voice light but her eyes clouded with an indescribable worry. Something rose from her chest to her throat, choking her. She hesitated, desperately wanting to break the silence that had gradually settled between them since the nightmare of that rainy night, but also afraid that even joy could shatter. Ryan gently approached, resting his hand on the back of a chair, his eyes softening at his wife's pensive expression. "Is something wrong, Em?" he asked softly, calmer than usual. Emma gripped the test kit tightly, then suddenly released it in front of Ryan. She took a deep breath, her voice trembling. I'm pregnant," her eyes glistening between day and night. Time stretched out. All outside sounds seemed to pause, only their two heartbeats echoing in the small space. Ryan stared at the test kit, at Emma's eyes, at every wrinkle around her eyes that hid an unprecedented mix of tension and joy. He hesitated, then smiled for the first time in a long time, a strange yet familiar smile like the first light of winter. He put his arm around his wife silently. Emma's body trembled slightly in his embrace. Tears welled in her eyes, her head resting on Ryan's shoulder as if wanting to bury all old fears. All that remained was a fragile yet intense happiness, enough to twist away every dark corner that worry and remorse had long covered them with. In that moment, light flooded the kitchen, illuminating the corner of the table where the pregnancy test kit had fallen. Smiles and tears mingled. Emma hugged her belly, both tearful and laughing like a child. Ryan buried his face in his wife's hair, not realizing his own tears were also streaming down his cheeks. Faint rays of hope rose from the depths of both their souls, but hidden beneath that veneer of peace, like shadows tiptoeing behind the light, an unseen but persistent current of unease was slowly creeping into their hearts because somewhere deep in their memories, the fateful rainy night and unspoken fears were always lurking, waiting for their weakest moment to return. The summer dream descended, and everything in the small house was suddenly tinged with an unusual stillness. Emma tossed and turned in her sheets, the bedroom light faintly reflecting her back on the wall. After the burst of maternal joy during the day, a simmering unease resurfaced, like lingering dampness in her heart. Unsure if it was morning sickness, anticipation, or some vague unnameable premonition, Emma couldn't find peace that night. Her fitful sleep took her to another place. In her dream, Emma found herself standing alone in the middle of a deserted asphalt road, a silent rain, heavy and dark, pouring down on her cold body. In the middle of the road, a tiny child, bright red as if still covered in birth blood, crawled naked on the cold asphalt. The child cried, Its cries not a dull sound but a tearing echo that scraped every blood vessel, reaching her very spine. Emma frantically rushed forward, her whole body weary as if stuck to the cold muddy road. She tried to bend down and pick up the child, but as soon as her fingers touched the soft blood-reeking skin, car headlights appeared at the end of the road, hurtling towards her in the rain, a light she knew wouldn't stop. Emma screamed, her call stifled. Stop, stop. But the car came closer and closer, overpowering everything with its terrifying engine roar. The child reached both hands out towards Emma, its eyes tear-filled, wailing, "Mommy." Everything flashed by. A heavy feeling tightly bound her abdomen, as if someone had just squeezed the life out of her own flesh. Emma woke with a start, her hands clutching her belly, her breath ragged, cold sweat pouring down her back. The night was still deep, every corner of the house silent, only the pounding of blood from within her chest. She rubbed her belly for a long time, her hands still holding the tight embrace from the dream. For a moment, Emma didn't dare let go. A vague fear welled up within her, that what had just appeared wasn't entirely from her own subconscious. In the following days, Emma found herself growing more attached to the little life within her, but at the same time, more bewildered by the strange hauntings that gradually seeped into her daily life. During the day, when Ryan was at work, she was alone at home. The living room window would often suddenly fly open, even though it was securely locked in the morning, curtains swaying horizontally and vertically, even though the door was almost closed. A few times, passing by the bedroom, she would find the bedside lamp still on, the pillow turned the wrong way. Small details Emma used to shrug off now became unsettling links. One morning, she discovered a small puddle of water seeping onto the wooden floor right by the bed. The water stained red, as if mixed with something other than dirt and roadside dust. The air in the house carried a faint metallic smell whenever it rained. Emma texted Ryan, "I must be confused lately. Can you please check the outdoor lock when you get home? I feel like someone's been in the house." Ryan texted back lightly, "You probably just forgot to lock it. Don't worry, the front door just got a new lock." But as she put her phone down, Emma knew that feeling didn't come from her own carelessness. She felt increasingly isolated in her own home. Every shadow, every small sound stretching into unusual rhythms, seeping into a worry no one could explain. One evening, as Emma despairingly walked around the house checking things again, she heard a whisper erupt from the corner of the living room. "Mommy, Mommy." The sound was just faint enough not to call Ryan out of his study, but too real for Emma to deny as an hallucination. She approached the sofa. The TV screen suddenly jumped to static. Amidst the flickering lights, the image of a wrecked car in the rain flashed, its headlights still hauntingly white. Emma rushed to turn off the TV, but the hum still echoed through the glass. Her chest ached. Her hand knocked over a glass of water onto the floor, the water mixing with a faint pink streak spreading beneath her feet. That night, Emma fell into a fitful sleep. In her dream, she was standing in the rainwater again, her whole body feeling like it was falling through space. This time, a child wrapped in an umbilical cord crawled towards her, each step dragging muddy water beneath its feet into a thick red streak. The child didn't cry, just looked at her with wide staring eyes, its small hand pulling a hoarse voice along. "I'm here." She struggled to run, but the binding tightened painfully, a chilling sensation spreading from her neck to the pit of her stomach. The next morning, Emma woke up exhausted. Her stomach ached dully, her palms soaked. Faint sunlight shone on the pillow. Right where her belly had rested was a faint red stain that vanished upon touch as if it had never been there. The following days were a limbo between reality and illusion, between the joy of motherhood and a fear deepening in her heart. Every night before the anniversary of the accident, Emma would fall into strange dreams. On the last night, a woman's figure emerged from the rain at the end of the street. This time her hair was dry, her dress white, her belly large but her face indistinct, her eyes and nose unclear. She approached, extended a hand and placed it on Emma's belly, a cold hand faintly smelling of iron, damp, blood seeping from between her fingers. Emma trembled, asking through her dream, "Who are you? What do you want?" The woman repeated in a deep voice from within her chest, "I was once a mother, now it's your turn." That silent smile was not of a normal face, and the woman's breath cast a cold, damp aura over Emma's body, as if from the other side of life. In a flash, Emma woke up, gasping in bed, her hand tracing her belly to find a faint red mark like a handprint seeping into her skin. The mark gradually faded, leaving only a cold spot on her skin. Emma cried, both from fear and from a vague, heavy maternal feeling that no one could fully describe. With every breath, her baby's heartbeat synchronized in her womb.
But Emma knew very well this child was no longer solely her own life, and from that moment, Emma deeply felt that all boundaries between the living and the faint shadow of guilt had shattered, blending two realities into a new cycle, as she herself became the focal point in the ghostly debt collection game of blood, of a curse gradually etching itself onto every cell of an unborn child.
A gloomy morning covered the suburban streets, the light blocked by heavy leaden clouds, as if foreshadowing a troubled day ahead. Emma woke with an unusual feeling, heavy yet empty. The space around her seemed to swell with a suffocating mist. In the living room, the weather forecast on TV flickered with static. Interspersed with the predictions was the crying of a child, sometimes near, sometimes far, as if echoing from the other side of life. Emma tried to turn off the TV, but the sound lingered among the cold walls, etching an unnameable unease into her mind. She glanced around the house. Everything had changed. On the sofa, her pregnancy pillow was ripped open, its stuffing exposed and crumpled like a severed umbilical cord. Emma paused for a long time, her heart pounding at the sight. The heater hummed, but sweat still beaded on the back of her neck. She knew for sure this place, at this moment, was no longer a refuge. Getting ready to leave for work, Emma stopped at the threshold, glancing back at the kitchen, where every familiar object suddenly bore a chill. She took a deep breath, adjusted her bag strap, and spoke softly like the wind. "If I'm late home today, don't worry, okay?" Ryan sat on the sofa, his eyes glued to his phone screen, only replying vaguely, "Just be careful." Something flashed briefly in Emma's eyes, like a final warning about to burst out, but then she swallowed it, leaving only another layer of silence that stretched endlessly between the couple. The sound of the door closing fell into the emptiness, echoing on the walls like the sigh of the house itself. In the afternoon, a sudden rainstorm descended upon the city, individual drops lashing against awnings and windows like a clock marking every tick of old anguish. Ryan walked around the house, turned on the coffee machine, checked his work schedule, but nothing could lift the heavy burden in his heart. He called Emma. The phone rang for a long time. No one answered. On the balcony, wind and rain lashed directly into the apartment, echoing a sound all too familiar from unforgettable memories. Ryan leaned his head against the window pane, closing his eyes, fragments of last year's accident returning violently, the cold rain stinging his face, the pregnant woman's dazed eyes, the screams, the car's headlights falling into despair. A lightning bolt struck a street lamp, the thunderclap splitting the hazy moment, leaving only the smell of ozone and a chest full of fear. The phone rang again, this time an unknown number. The voice of the 911 operator came through the static. "Excuse me, are you Emma Carter's husband?" Ryan froze, his hands icy cold. He tried to remain calm, his throat constricted. The announcement from the other end struck his heart directly. "We are very sorry. Your wife was in an accident on Highway 21. The accident location matches last year's accident. It was raining heavily at the time. Wind rushed through the crack in the door, bringing into the room a cold smell mixed with death." Ryan trembled, clutching the phone tightly. The only question bursting from his despair was anyone else with her? "My child, was it saved?" The operator's voice was hoarse. "No, she was alone in the car. Blood has stained the rain. The apology never uttered has become a silent judgment. And that crying sound still won't stop. If you also hear something other than the rain, comment below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to not miss the next part of the story, Debt Paid. See you again on Whisper Horror Channel, where curses don't need to be named to find their way home.